Alrighty guys, it's my favorite time of the week, Wednesday. And what does Wednesday mean? Survivor Wednesday. So let's get to it. In tonight's episode of Survivor Season 30, Worlds Apart, episode number 9, Will went off. Rodney went off. Mike is grasping at straws, trying his hardest to save himself even though he has an immunity idol. And Sharon sheds some tears. Meanwhile, Jen goes, bye-bye. And here is what I had to say about this episode. And if you follow me on Twitter, which you guys should be following me, sagevalentine or at sagevalentine, then you would know how I feel or how I felt at the moment. I was trying to figure out what in God's name was going on as far as Will not only attacking Sharon for talking behind his back with Jen and Mike, but I was wondering why in the hell didn't he mention Mike's name? He should have said, you know what, Mike came up to me and said, and then boom, everything would have stopped, the argument would have stopped, and everybody would have seen that Mike started all of this. I was even upset at Sharon. I'm like, Sharon should have said, you know what, Mike sat down here with Jen and said that you are rationing food from that food that you shared with us, as if you have more food and you're holding out. My thing is just that Will went a little bit too far with the personal attacks. But everybody else is to blame as well because nobody came to this girl's defense at all. But then again, they really don't like her as it is. So pretty much everybody's tolerating her. And I really feel like once they get rid of the threats that they want to get rid of and she's left, they're going to get rid of her too just because in their eyes she's annoying. And the reason why Sharon is annoying to the other players is because Sharon is always talking. This is the complaint that they've had since the first episode. Sharon is a super fan, and she let everybody know that she's a super fan, which I was like side-eyeing her like, Sharon, just stop. And the third thing was that Sharon keeps like blowing up everybody's gameplay at the different tribal councils, at the reward challenge, at the immunity challenge. And she just needs to stop talking and just play for herself. I really hope that in the next episode, she realizes that nobody is a friend to her in this game. And the only one thing that Mike was correct in, or not even Mike, Dan was correct in what he said last week, was that she's aligning herself with the wrong people because once again, she's in yet another sinking ship now that Jen is gone. It's only her and Mike, and she really can't even trust Mike because Mike is in it for himself. Alrighty, so Will was the first person to get, like, the big bye-bye during the Trader Jeff's auction for tonight's Survivor. And I was just like, well, Will, that's karma for all the stuff that you've done. But then again, that kind of sucks. But I was really disappointed in Mike because his paranoia definitely messed him up during the auction because at first he was going to hold out and not take the food like everybody else. And then all of a sudden, Jeff Probst pulls out this tray of letters from home. And most of his tribe mates are running for the tray and talking about they're going to take their letters. And Mike tells everybody he's going to do it. Then he flops saying he's not. And then everybody kind of like starts grumbling. Then he runs back to the table and he's taking his letter. And in doing so, in paying that $20 that everybody agreed to pay for their letters, he messed himself up because in the end, Dan ended up acquiring that big advantage. So it was a waste. And then once everybody returns back to the tribe or the camp, and Will presents everyone with these snacks and electrolyte powder and all this stuff that he received from Survivor, here comes Mike ruining the whole positive moment, especially as everybody's just happy to have their letters. Here he comes calling out Rodney, talking about Rodney flipped on me, blase, blase, blah. And I'm like, listen, this is the wrong time to do this. Sierra spoke up and she's just like, dude, this is the wrong time. Then here comes Mike apologizing. Now, somebody on Twitter basically said, well, he was thinking of jury votes and however this would look to the jury. Mike's already done a whole bunch of questionable things before this, so this would not add any fuel to the fire that's already present as there is. Now, Rodney goes after Dan's vote because he wants to cement this idea of getting rid of Mike. Dan learns that his advantage is an extra vote that will come in handy later in the game, or possibly soon. Depends upon when he wants to use it. So all of a sudden, Mike decides to play upon others' paranoia. Now, first he goes to Sharon and Jen and starts this conversation about how he's appreciative of what Will did as far as sharing his food and his rations with everybody else. The ones that, Survivor gave him. But he believes that Will is holding out. And then he turns around and runs to Will and tells Will that Sharon and Jen both believe that he is holding out, and thus basically sets off Will. Will goes on this whole tirade, and it's one thing that he's upset with her for what she said, but then he goes off and says quite a few personal things that really hurt her, including the fact that she has no family and that nobody in Survivor at this point likes her. And this upsets Sharon, who then looks for sympathy and solace from others, as most people do when they're hurt. The problem is that nobody stood up for Sharon. Nobody basically told Will, you're wrong. And I'm really pissed off that Will didn't even mention that this was all Mike's idea that he brought to him. And then Sharon didn't mention that Mike was the one that brought up this conversation. And it really did not surprise me when it turned out that Mike won the immunity challenge. Nor did it surprise me. It upset me. But then I understood what she was doing and why she did it. When Sharon basically blocked Will from getting his letter from home. It was a little bit petty. Will should have been able to at least get his letter, but Sharon had her reasons. Mike is looking at Sierra as a threat because he feels like she's not on his side, but then he also wants to blindside Carolyn. Then Mike thinks that Dan is no longer on his side, and he's trying to convince Dan to come back to his side. Meanwhile, Dan, who has aligned himself with Rodney, Carolyn, Will, and Tyler, and Sierra, they're all kind of looking at him like he may flip on them. And then Tyler goes over to him trying to tell him what's going on, and Dan's just like, I need to make this decision on my own. This is my game. I need to do this. And Carolyn feels like, you know what, if I have to, I'm going to use my immunity item. Mike is telling Dan that Rodney's group does not have his back at all. And Dan realizes that he is the swing vote, and he's really upset about that. So at Tribal Council, Will spills the beans about the situation. And then Sharon tells her side of the story about what happened between her and Will, and she breaks down crying, which I'm annoyed with her about, because don't show these people that they bothered you. Just play the hell out of this game and the heck with them. And then part of me was wondering, was this breakdown strategy, considering that Sharon is a super fan, and by showing her weakness, this will further her in the game, because everybody will look at her like, oh, well, she's weak. We can beat her. Just keep her in the game. But that's just me saying this. Jen tries to remedy the situation by mentioning that everybody's tired and sleep deprived, and that's why they're fighting. Mike brings up Rodney's alliance. Then we get down to the vote. we end up having Jen versus Sharon versus Carolyn. Carolyn gets 1 vote, Sharon gets 4 votes, and Jen gets 5 votes, and Jen goes bye-bye. And I'm not the least surprised, as I said previously, that Jen went home simply because Jen is a strong player. People listen to Jen. Joe listened to Jen, which is probably why Joe is no longer in the game. And Holly listened to Jen. And at one point, a lot of people were listening to Jen. And then her display last week with saying that she no longer wanted to be in the game. And that made me question whether or not it was strategy or did she really feel that way. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. This is Sage Valentine signing off. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button. Rate this video, leave your comments about this season, and hit me up on Twitter and Google+, Sage Valentine. Until next time, you all take care. I love you guys. Bye, guys. Bye.